All right, what the heck happened in week 2 of college wrestling? And it feels like we are now in full swing. Tons of upsets, lots of notable results, some freshmen, some key standouts. I'm going to get into everything, all the major happenings this week in college wrestling, starting with Stanford's trip to Iowa. They wrestled Iowa State on Friday, Iowa on Saturday. And Friday, the big takeaway for me, one, shout out to Stanford for beating Iowa State at Iowa State. That's certainly notable, even though it was definitely a skeleton crew for Iowa State who was missing 5 starters. And so your mind immediately goes to, man, are they going to be ready? Are they going to be healthy for the Iowa duel in just a couple weeks? That's a huge question. That duel will be fireworks, but Iowa State's got to bring the A-team because Iowa, as we saw this weekend, very, very tough team and the number 2 team in America for a reason. But the biggest match in Stanford, Iowa State, it was Christian Carroll for me taking out Nick Stimmett. I'm telling you, this guy looked really good. The question was, how's he going to feel down at 197? He's sort of a tweener. Is he a heavyweight? Is he a 197? Looking at him out on the mat, he looks like a 197 to me. Very fast, quick to the leg, and a great feel for the sport, great feel in the scrambles. I was extremely impressed with Christian Carroll taking out a seasoned vet in Nick Stimmett. A lot to be excited about there. It was a pretty dominant win for Carroll if you watch the exchanges and all the scoring sequences. So for Iowa State, that's an area where they need some points, and it looks like they could be getting real points from Christian Carroll. So that was a big takeaway from that one. Also got to see Aiden Valencia wrestle against Iowa State and Iowa. He was 2-0. He pinned Redding, and he really kind of handled Ryder Block for Iowa. So he's a true freshman. Don't know if they're going to use him yet. My guess is no. But we'll have to wait and see. But no doubt about it, Aiden Valencia could place this year if Stanford elected to use him. But let's go to Iowa City, Stanford versus Iowa. This was honestly probably the most notable and significant duel in terms of results. And we saw 2 really significant upsets. While Stanford won against Iowa State, they didn't really pull any upsets there. They pulled 2 upsets against Iowa. So even though they lost this duel, really, I feel like they upped their stock more in this duel than the other, where you had at 133, Tyler Knox from Stanford took out Drake Ayala. And Drake Ayala was an NCAA finalist last year at 125 for Iowa, moving up to 133. And he looked good against Oregon State, but Tyler Knox is a different kind of test. And it was a key takedown and back points for Knox that put him out in the lead, and he was able to hang on and knock off Drake Ayala in a match that had a lot of exchanges. And so if you're an Iowa fan, what does this mean for Drake? Well, Drake doesn't lose he's not a guy that gets upset by non-All-American type of guys, right? But based on what Knox did last year, now he was a redshirt last year, so you kind of take those results with a grain of salt, but he was losing to some unranked guys. He was taking some losses that would be a little bit questionable. So you're wondering, is this a change in performance for Drake Ayala, or is Tyler Knox just that guy? That's what we don't know right now. You would want to lean towards Knox maybe as just an All-American caliber guy right now, because that's basically the only kind of guys that beat Drake are those AA tier type of wrestlers. So something to monitor for Drake as he's now entering a new weight class and frankly a tougher and deeper weight class at 133. So a little cause for concern there. It's early. He had a out of character loss to Kaler last year, but Kaler was an All-American. Tyler Knox, we'll see. The other major, result in this duel was Nelson Brands falling to Lorenzo Norman of Stanford. Now, if you remember the name Lorenzo Norman, we were talking about it a lot about a year ago when he knocked off Shane Griffith at Cliff Keen, Las Vegas. Now, Lorenzo Norman takes out Nelson Brands. He gets a takedown off a leg attack, and then Nelson really wasn't able to degenerate. And for Iowa fans, this is 2 straight matches where Nelson has failed to get a takedown. He wrestled Sean Harmon, who is tough, and Lorenzo Norman, who is tough. But if Nelson Brands is going to replicate his performance from 2 years ago, where he placed 5th at 174, he needs to be winning and getting takedowns against these types of wrestlers. So you have to also recall for Nelson, for Iowa fans, if you're nervous, about Nelson at 74, can be a slow starter. He really came on at the end of that 22-23 season where he placed 5th. He beat Plott. He beat Ohio State kid Ethan Smith, among other really tough guys. So he came on at the end of last year. So if it's a slow start, remember he was off the mat last year. He was suspended, didn't do any matches down at 174. So a little bit of adjustment, a little bit of grace, but you want to see it starting to correct here soon for Iowa, because they made a big move by bumping up Gabe Arnold to 184, and thus far Gabe Arnold has looked awesome. But Iowa fans, you got to remember, Gabe hasn't wrestled this year anyone with a above 500 record. So, as his competition increases, as they improve, we'll see where Gabe is really at. But right now, if a lot of people are getting carried away with Gabe Arnold, but I understand why. He has looked sensational so far. But we saw Stephen Buchanan's looked really good. We had Ethan is his brother, Kyle Parker with a tech over Jaden Abbas. That was a really strong performance. Ja'Cory Teamer getting it done against Gregor Chalakian. So all in all, solid performance for Iowa, but definitely two situations to monitor with 133 and 174. So that was Stanford's trip to Iowa, certainly very eventful. Other notable things with some of the blue blood teams: Oklahoma State sent a crew to the Michigan State Open, and while the fields there weren't super tough, the most notable things are that we saw Cale Hughes at 133 and Tegan Jamison at 141. There was a lot of questions. Would these guys be able to make those weight classes and compete? Well, so far the answer is yes. Tegan went 141. He won the whole tournament. Cale Hughes went 33, won the whole tournament. That's a great showing. And then Cody Merrill wrestled at 197 for Oklahoma State, and he won as well. But the question with Merrill is, do they use him? He's a true freshman, and they've got Luke Serber there. So a little bit of question. If we do see Merrill, I think we'll see him in some duels. I'm just not sure how many we'll see Cody Merrill wrestling. So definitely, for Oklahoma State's best lineup, you feel like it's Cale Hughes at 33 and Tegan at 41. But are they functional there? It looks like right now the answer is yes. So Coach Taylor and company getting the pieces in play to make a run this year. And I think it starts with that 33 and 41 being in the right spots. And it looks like they are for right now. All right, what else happened? All right, at Journeyman, Vince Robinson was the story. NC State's 125-pounder. And coming into this year, we would have said NC State's backup 125-pounder to Jacob Camacho. Camacho's been, a top 10 guy basically his entire career. He was ranked as high as number 1 last year. Well, Vince Robinson was sensational. He was dominant in all 3 wins. He beat Sotelo and beat some other really tough guys. Whereas Jacob Camacho, a surprising 0-3 showing, and right now it looks like Vince Robinson should be and will be the 125-pounder, at least for the time being, for NC State, and which NC State is right now a team, they have so much talent for a lot of different weight classes. You look at 125, you've got a top 10 guy in Jacob Camacho, likely on the bench. Vince Robinson going to be the starter there. At 41, you've got Ryan Jack and Kyorini. At 49, you've got Coy Biskins, but that's where Jackson Arrington's wrestled. Arrington just won Journeyman at 157, but they also have Ed Scott there, right? So this is a team with a lot, and not even mentioning heavyweight where they have Owen Treffin and Isaac Trumbull. So a lot of talent there, and they're trying to make it all fit via red shirts and bumping guys around. But now I'm wondering, do we see Camacho maybe make the move up to 133? They have Dragan Orini there. Does NC State? Does Camacho make that move up? Ed Scott struggles. He loses to Harrington of Harvard, as well as Jude Swisher from Penn. Meanwhile, Arrington looks awesome, his teammate. So do they consider bumping Ed or starting Arrington over Ed Scott? A lot of questions for Coach Papalizio's Wolfpack, and there's not a lot of bad answers. They have so much talent, but it's making it all fit and putting a really quality lineup on the mat. So I'm curious to see how Coach Papalizio and company navigate a team with so much talent, but there's only 10 weight classes. So that was one of the more notable things to follow at Journeyman. Also, Luke Stanich at 141. He was 125 last year, All-American, ranked number 1, as were many, at 125 last year at a point. But now Luke has moved up 2 weight classes. He's still redshirting right now, but I think he's going to make it real. I think for Lehigh coaching staff, I think you're probably going to have to use Stanich. They have Malik Hines there, who is going to qualify. He can win matches at nationals. But Luke Stanich in a couple weeks at 141 has proven to be more consistent than I think Hines has been able to. So I think we saw last week Stanich was able to beat Sergio Limley. This week he beats Kyorini, among other guys. He goes undefeated. I think Luke Stanage looks like a guy that you're going to want to put in your lineup, but definitely a situation to monitor there with Journeyman. We also saw at Journeyman, there was a ton of great action this entire tournament. Frank Popolizio does a great job there. Colton Schultz, we saw fall to Luke Luffman, got stalled. He wasn't stalled out, but he got hit for stalling in overtime, losing to Illinois' Luke Luffman. Illinois, a really tough team this year. I've talked about them a little bit on FRL, and Luffman getting a win over Schultz, certainly probably the biggest win of his career. But then Schultz pins Isaac Trumbull from NC State, so a great win there for him. And you have a little bit of kind of inconsistent results there. And Owen Treffin had a big win this week as well, and he's likely going to be NC State's backup. So heavyweight had a lot of action at Journeyman, and then we also saw Edmund Ruth, from Illinois. He took a loss to Ebert. He took a loss to Brian Soldano. Brian Soldano is the craziest wrestler in NCAA wrestling. It's not disputable. This guy is trying to pin you the entire time, regardless of score, regardless of tactics. This guy is just going for it. And Brian Soldano takes the match to overtime against Edmund Ruth and ends up getting the pin over Edmund. So Edmund goes down to Soldano and Will Ebert of Binghamton, but then he beats Dylan Fishback of NC State. So definitely, Fishback's a stud. He's really good for the Wolfpack. So a lot of inconsistent results there for Edmund Ruth on the weekend. Another situation to monitor, Meyer Shapiro, my pick to win 157. He was third last year as a true freshman. This guy can score in so many different ways. He had to injury default because of concussion, head issues. This is not new for Meyer. This is something he's been dealing with throughout the last couple of years. And so now for Meyer to get sidelined potentially with head injuries already, it's definitely concerning for Cornell fans, for Meyer Shapiro fans, as you're wondering, hey, this is a match he was up 9-1. He tries an inside trip, and he falls on his shoulder, and his head lands, and there's another exchange. He kind of lands on his head, and you watch the sequences, you're like, wow, it doesn't look like he's hitting that hard, which really can kind of show that the head is maybe a little bit more compromised than normal if these kind of wrestling sequences are bringing about match-ending injuries. So definitely we wish Meyer well and hope his head can heal and he's able to wrestle, but those are not situations to be taken lightly. So definitely for someone that I think can win a national title, many people think can win a national title, something you want to keep your eye on. So those are some of the highlights. There was so much more that happened. You should check out, you should go to FloWrestling, look at the top upsets of the week. There were a lot. I can't get into all of them here. It'd take about an hour. Check those out. Check out the updated rankings. And also know this, big week coming up in college wrestling. Of course, all eyes are on Saturday's NWCA All-Star Classic at Penn State. And of course, the main event of main events, Carter Starachi, four-time national champion, taking on the reigning 184 national champion, Parker Keckeisen. Going to be a great match. Also live on Flow, you're going to have Oregon State against Oklahoma State. This is David Taylor's first big test as the head coach of Oklahoma State. And then the day before the All-Star Classic, Virginia Tech taking on Missouri. There's a bunch of other dual meets. Those are the highlights. Make sure you're staying up to speed. Follow FloWrestling on social media. Go to FloWrestling.com to stay up to speed with what's going on in college wrestling. Thanks for watching.